So when we think about a worship song, so we think about, okay, you said these are good songs. These are good
Right,
worship
yeah,
songs.
sure.
What makes a good worship song?
Drums.
Well, obviously. I meant after drums.
Yeah, drums is a given.
That's a given.
That's
Sorry.
a given.
Sorry.
Oh, man. We're trying to go deeper here.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Can you go? Can you go deeper than drums?
Well, I think a critical piece to any worship song is that the message is truth.
Sure.
All too often, you'll see I've witnessed it where you'll be a part of a worship, and you just aren't thinking that what's coming out is the gospel.
Yeah. Right.
And I think that's a critical piece to any worship, is that what we're singing is the truth as it relates to the Bible.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's songs that we've heard, we love,
Yeah.
that we know would get the congregation going, but we don't do because it doesn't meet that truth aspect.
I think that's really good.
Yeah, it's more like sensationalism, like like it's
Yeah.
emotion and it gets you going. But like when you listen to the lyrics, it's like, what was that? Every Move I Make, right? Like that song. Like no, that's dated. But like Every Move I Make, everybody sang that song. You make me move, Jesus. Yeah. But then literally the chorus is like waves of mercy, waves of grace. So I don't know. But if you really like look at the lyrics, you're like, what are they talking about? And then it's like na na, and any song that has na na as like the hook, you're like, okay. It's fun to sing, but is that like, I always think when it comes to worship music, I look at like, and this is kind of what Warren's getting at. Like one of the things we look at is like, who is it directed to? Like, is it about me and me, or is it literally about God or Jesus? Or it has to be part of the Trinity. You know what I mean? It has to be focused that way.
Well, I think that's where the challenge is. By the way, is that a Delirious song? I think that was Delirious.
Was it Delirious?
I think that's Delirious.
Man,
So I think,
those Brits.
Well, I think that's the catch. The catch is, like, so Every Move I Make is about my response to God's love for me,
Yes,
for what God's
right.
doing in my life, right?
Right.
But the focus really is on me in that sense, right? So it's, I mean, I guess we could break down the sentence structure and talk about what the subject is.
Sure.
But there has to be an element of self in worship to a degree, right?
Right, sure.
Like,
Because we're the ones worshiping.
we're expressing gratitude.
Right.
So I am grateful.
Right.
So I need to express that I'm grateful. So
Right.
like that's an element of worship.
Right.
But when it's about, like I have a problem with some of the songs that are like you go through like 3 verses of God, my life is awful. Everything's been bad. I'm constantly just not doing the things you told me to do. But I love you, and that's the chorus, right? Right? Yeah. And you lift me up again because they're going to say.
Let me write that down.
Yeah. That's
Chris
just awesome
Tomlin.
records.
Chris Tomlin, you can't steal this.
Yeah, if you talk about deserts or drowning in the water, that's right. You're going to sell an album, buddy. Yeah.
But that kind of that's.
And there's an element of that, like the Psalms have depressing psalms,
Yes.
but at the end of the day, it goes back to there's a truth that they're speaking.
Yeah.
And the truth that is, I'm going to worship you. Like that's okay. That's a good go get them, sport. Like that's a good message. But the truth is, like in that like a lyric like that, I would look at it and say like, okay, but what can God do? Like talk about how God is a deliverer, but you know what I mean? Like talk about the characteristics of God. Like even if you want to talk about how life is tough, that's okay. I mean, I understand life is really tough, but don't just worship is about our response to the Lord. It's not about what can Jesus do for me. It's what we're literally giving to Him, which should be glory, honor, praise. And I know I'm lumping a lot of answers here, but I think that's one of the things that Warren would say. And when you sing songs, how often do you feel like you hear the words I, me, my? Like, I mean, that's always you always see that stuff.
Yeah.
Well, and so we've kind of discussed here. So we need to appeal to God's character. We need to have the truth of the Word, the truth of who God is. Right? We're singing as a response to Him, so it should be about Him.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And declare His character. Also, maybe a confession of devotion to God could be an act of worship, right? So songs that are that center around serving God. Like, Lord, we're going to serve you, and making that. So I think there can be elements like you can hear it, like you'll hear a song and you'll say, that doesn't strike me as worship or praise, but it strikes me as a very moving prayer.
Sure. Yeah, for sure.
And I think when you dig through the Psalms, you're going to find things like that in the Psalms, because the Psalms are artistic, they're poetic, they're musical. There's a lot to them, and they're not. It's not titled worships,
Right.
right? Yeah, right.
Worships.
right.
Worships 121.
That's right.
Verse 4 says, yeah.
Right.
Well, and not only that, too, I was going to say, I think like it goes back to what separates Christian music from worship music, and I think that's the shift.
Yeah.
Right. Is like Christian music can be about God. I find a lot of times Christian music you're listening to, and it has a positive message. It may even mention the Lord or church or some kind of trigger word. But often, like, it's almost like secular in the aspect of sometimes you're listening to Christian music and you're like, oh man, like if this wasn't on Joy FM, like if this was on like Y98, like,
Right.
And it could be, because if it just took off there, it's kind of like, just take out the baby and it's like, or put baby in and they'd be like, oh, he's talking about his
girlfriend.
His girlfriend,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are some
Like your love gets me through. Like you're like, oh yeah, coming home, dude's had a hard day at work, and no, he's talking about Jesus. Like that's I think the distinctive characteristic of worship is there's no guessing.
Yeah.
Like you know who it's about.
So I think that's always a funny kind of concept of and I know South Park did a whole thing
Oh, for
about
sure.
that, where
They
like,
just took.
take
Yeah,
love
have you seen
songs
that
and-
out? You would love that.
Oh no.
So
Yeah.
but
Basically, Cartman just takes all of the like contemporary songs and crosses out baby and just writes Jesus in.
Yeah.
And he ascends the heights of Christian worship.
right, and so I think there's some humor to that, and that's where our mind goes with some of that.
Right.
But I also think that that's a testament of how, I don't know if this is the right word, but how depraved our society is.
Oh, for sure.
That we associate anything that has to do with love and devotion to romantic relationships.
Most certainly.
Right. Now that's a podcast for another time, but
Which you said in every single podcast.
Yeah.
Yes.
you would know that if you listen.
I won't be included.
Yeah, that's right.
But we were talking not too long ago, right before we sat down to record an episode previously, one that you haven't listened to yet.
He's busy listening to Mark Martin.
Yeah. And you were talking about, I think it was a Toby Mac song. And
Oh, yeah.
right. And he's like dealing with grief and like,
Oh, I know. He probably knows the Toby Mac song. It's when he lost his son. He writes this song, and it's a beautiful song. But I was listening like to the actual, like literally listening to the lyrics, and I was like, oh, I'm not sure about this. Like, there's a couple things he says, and I'm like, ooh, like that make you cringy.
see, just hearing you describe it, I haven't listened to it because I don't. But
Because he doesn't like Toby Mac.
That's not my jam anymore.
'Cause-
not since
yeah.
Michael W. Smith, 1993.
Once DC Talk broke up, he said, he's dead to me. Toby Mac is dead to me.
I was done after the Jesus Freak album. That was it. That was the last album.
Could you get any better?
Wasn't that their first album?
We'll come back to that. But the sense that I get, and I think there are other songs that are like this, is it's a conversation of this is how I felt. And I almost feel like there needs to be like a disclaimer on these songs to say like this is not the truth of who God is or what he's doing in your life.
Right.
This is somebody talking about going through trouble, right?
Right.
And there's an artistic element to that, but if you don't have the context of it,
Right.
you might get the wrong idea about who God is and what he's doing in people's lives.
Yep.
Right. Yeah, if you didn't know, like the Toby Mac song, like if you didn't know it was about his son that he just passed, like you listen to it and you're kind of like, okay, there's a lot of like bitterness and depression and like I understand you just lost your son, but at the same time, the listener who's listening to it, if they just turned on Joy FM for the first time, this is what they're hearing, and it's not a message that's like you. It's like in church, like Warren said, you don't want to sing a song that like is leading people down a path that isn't necessarily theologically
Sound.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
and I'm not asking for always sound theology in Christian music, but I am saying like you need to say like here's the like that's why Joy FM needs to be really clear, and I think they kind of are, but like when you listen on Sunday, they're very clear. This is Sunday morning worship.
Yep.
But everybody else associates. And this is I hear this on Joy FM. I heard this on Air One the other day too. Is it's like you are the one who gets me through the day. And I'm thinking they're not talking about Sunday morning worship. They're talking about the song that the Toby Mac song that they heard.
Right.
And that as a pastor makes me a little bit like, ooh, I wonder what you're thinking. You know, like what's going on in that noggin? You know?
Well, that's a really good question. Man, I had somewhere else I wanted. Oh, you know what? I think this is why I prefer secular music, to Christian music, is because I don't have to guess about the theology of it. I know it's not going to be theologically correct.
Right.
I know what I'm getting. I know that, like, hey, I'm enjoying this, or I'm enjoying the musicianship of it, or you know, I'm enjoying the vocal elements of it, or the cleverness of the lyrics. But I know it's not glorifying. Which then leaves me like, well, why am I listening? You know, like I think this is a question that I end up wrestling with. But
and so often for me, even though I'm primarily a vocalist,
Right.
for me it's not about the lyrics. There's most of the time I don't even hear the lyrics.
We know.
But it's about the music for me.
Sure,
So
sure.
I could be listening to whatever, but if it's got a nice beat, a nice rhythm, nice instrumentals, I'm all about it.
okay, so when I was in Bible college, we were hanging out with some guys in this room, and like, man. So sometimes the conversations we would call people super spits because it was short for super spiritual, right? Everything had to be like over analyzed.
I'm gonna start using that all day, man. Yeah.
And so they had this like techno like music, you know, whatever. I can't do it because I don't listen to that type of music. And they're like, you got to listen to this. And so it's just that like driving beats and things.
Sure.
And not real drums.
Right.
But like drum sounds.
Yeah.
And they have like
Drum like.
And actually this is kind of my inspiration for the project that I think we should do where like you then have like this old timey preacher like,
heck yeah.
voice over it, right?
Yeah.
And then he's talking about music and he's like, so you say you don't listen to the lyrics. So what are you moved by? The spirit of it? You know, and everybody, you know, in the room is like, oh, the spirit of it. It's a bad spirit. Right?
Super spits.
And I can't get that out of my head now. Anytime I hear that.
I'm glad I could bring it back for you.
Anytime I don't listen to the lyrics, it's not about the lyrics, it's about the music. And the things, well, what moves you about the music? Now, I think that's a bit legalistic.
Sure.
And here's the thing. All good things come from God.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So if you take Freddie Mercury, like, off the top of that Queen song, singing about so many inappropriate things I'm not going to say. Right? God gave us music.
Somebody to
right?
love?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
What's wrong with that song?
You know, we're not going to get into it.
That's a podcast for another
Another
time.
podcast for another
That's
time.
a Queen contemporary Christian song.
Bohemian Rhapsody. That's pretty good. That actually, he's on to something. Yeah, that is a contemporary Christian song in today's language because we just associate as Christians anytime we talk about love. Obviously, we're talking about a godly type of love, even if the lyrics are like, "That's not a godly type of love."
Right. Well,
Yeah.
okay. So we're getting derailed here, but
But here, I do want to say this. I think part of the reason why I personally and probably even Warren, and I think probably even you too, is for the longest time, like why we listen to secular music, not because we're heathens. For the longest time, Christian music as a music genre was not good. And by that I mean like there was nothing appealing. Like I grew up listening to like punk rock and like things like, now I grew up in the Tooth and Nail generation, that was when music for Christians, for me at least, started to, that's when contemporary, you know, like that, that's when those bands started kind of to where there was a time when I was younger that the Christian bands were Switchfoot,
Yep.
you know, I mean, MXP, you know.
I was say you're jumping with Switchfoot, which is, you know, I remember the first Switchfoot album. Like,
Sure.
I imagine you're talking about after they added the guitarist from Fold Zandura.
Right.
You know,
Obviously,
yeah,
yes.
obviously. But like I remember getting the mixtape from my brother, which had, you know, the Supertones on it.
Oh, yeah.
And it had and like the original, the OC Supertones.
Oh yeah, OC, yeah.
And that first album, and then he had Five Iron Frenzy on it, and he had And he had MXPX
Yes,
on
yep.
it, right? And he had Stavesacre on it,
Uh-huh.
obviously.
Obviously.
And there was like these bands, these Tooth and Nail bands. This is the pre-Ann Berlin days.
Right, yeah, oh,
like,
yeah, oh,
they
yeah.
built everything that these other bands you're talking about now
Right.
rest upon.
Oh, most certainly. Oh, and I'm right there. But that was
Mike Knott and LSU Underground.
Oh, and what was it? Goaty Hook? Was that
Goaty Hook, yeah.
Yeah. So Warren's like I love Freddie Mercury.
Steve Green.
Yeah, Steve Green. Yeah.
I like Keith Green.
Keith
Green was great, but when I was a kid, I didn't. Like,
Sure.
I would listen to Keith Green as a kid and be like, I want to listen to stupid piano music.
Right.
But now I listen to it, I'm like, dang, that's talent.
Oh, sure.
And I have a better appreciation for it. But
Well, like the Gaithers.
style.
Like the
Yeah.
Gaithers
Oh, yeah.
are like a Church of God thing.
Yeah.
I couldn't stand them. But now, as I'm older, maybe I'm just getting older and I'm open to more music. But like vocally, they are a very good vocal band. And
Yeah.
but like there was nothing appealing about that. And I think that is the one interesting thing in the move and shift of worship is there was a shift in like the 90s to add a guitar, to add the drums,
Right.
to add a guitar, and then there's now a shift to add kind of like the pads in the I mean you remember like Christian hip hop used to be like laughable. Like, like, oh, Jesus is the best in the world. Like
You didn't like that?
no, I didn't.
That was pretty good.
really good. Actually, I got a rap album coming out.
Let me turn my recorder on.
All right. I don't think I've told this story here, but we did a mission trip
Oh gosh,
to Wisconsin.
the air quotes in that were very
From,
big.
from
Because-
Texas?
Yeah.
From St. Louis.
Oh.
When I was like 13, and like we performed at a coffee shop, and my youth pastor performed Carmen's A to J,
Oh yes, thank you.
and I performed Toby's rap
Oh
at
yes.
the age of 13. There are no videos.
is there video?
There's no video.
I wish there
Yeah.
was.
But I can still get some of the lyrics out, but I'm not going to. Anyway, but like you didn't like that type of
No. Like no. But here's what's really interesting, I think, about like modern worship music. As a guitarist, I play guitar. Like I really like a lot of modern because I'm a big U2. I like U2. And like even though U2 kind of they're one of those bands that like you could listen to and be like, is they Christian? Are they not?
Yep.
That was a big movement when I was in college. Was like I remember we did a youth conference and they had these guys come in and they were playing The Streets Have No Name.
Yeah.
And I was like, what does this have to do with God?
Right.
I don't understand.
Right.
This is not worship. You just really like that edge effect on your guitar.
And I love
You're not
yeah.
listening close enough then.
Yeah.
Thanks, Warren.
But that's what I'm saying. That is the attract. Like there was a shift in Christian music that made it more. What is the word I'm looking for? Not
Mainstream?
Not yeah.
You
Mainstream.
still haven't found what you're looking for?
Nice. Looking for it. No.
Let's start saying
Relatable. That's the word. Like it made it more
yeah.
like I could listen to it and hear the same kind of sounds and tones and production level. Like I think there is a move in Christian music today of excellence that is like very well, almost to a fault, very well produced. And so I think that's part of the reason why I grew up listening. I listened to Christian music, but the Christian music that was around, I mean, let's be real. DC Talk. I mean, Jesus Freak was cool.
Yeah.
But, makes me want to riot. Come on. Carmen, like
Carmen was better before he tried to be relevant.
that's true. That is true.
Carmen was phenomenal before he got up.
Wasn't he on like TBN? Like like the mainstream thing ruined him. Yeah.
And he got a TBN and he did like a 30-minute show and he would introduce bands and music videos.
Right.
And that's the first place I heard the Newsboys.
Oh, really?
Which was way, way, way back in the day before they were popular.
He loves all of the groups that took DC Talk.
That's right. No, that was Carmen.
Right.
And Newsboys.
Right.
Oh, I guess they did.
Because they got Tate now. Yeah.
Tate now.
That's what I'm telling
Yeah.
you. Yeah.
No, K-Max was my favorite
Of course.
because he was edgy and he was the rock guy. And of course and we all saw this coming. He was the first to deconstruct. So, anyway, I guess that's not funny in context.
Well, I love it. Yeah, he did. He did deconstruct.
He did
but
deconstruct.
But back to what we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Because we're not just talking about how amazing old Christian music is, but I think the difference between, because back to your question, like what are the elements of worship?
Yeah.
I think that like the number one thing that we as a church look at and this is like a total Bible school answer, like, Bible college, is it bringing together, uniting us with Christ, and is it uniting us as the body of Christ? Oops,
sure.
I just smoked my mic with my hand. doing this, what is it, horizontal and vertical?
Yes.
I told someone the other day it was diagonal. I was like, wait, that's this way. But I think that's another element of worship, is it should be uniting, but uniting under the banner of Christ.
Okay.